It's no lie to say that 2012 was a huge year for space games. After all, it saw the two biggest current space games show their faces to the public for the very first time. But what few people will know, however, is that 2012 also saw the beginnings of a third massive space game, one that had ambitions every much as big as Elite and Star Citizen. Limit Theory, then, was a lesser-known project, but one that raised almost as much money as 2012's Oculus Rift Kickstarter campaign. Like Star Citizen and Elite Dangerous, Limit Theory was a space game with huge ambitious scope, a vast procedurally generated universe, the ability to own and control fleets of ships, not to mention trading, combat, exploration, mining, and much more, all layered against a backdrop of NPC civilizations and factions that would bring the universe to life. An amazing proposition then, and a game that, for a lot of people, was extremely appealing. Yet what happened to this title, and where is it today? To understand why so much hope and anticipation was placed upon Limit Theory, it's important to remember the nature of crowdfunding back in 2012. It was the year that the concept first hit the collective consciousness. It also sparked the imagination of the games community at large. Many people then felt there was no limit on what crowdfunding could potentially achieve. Unbridled optimism was everywhere. Sure, some people might argue that this was all very naive, yet some massive successes were born from that very same period. Oculus Rift raised a successful campaign. In fact, the Oculus Kickstarter campaign could arguably be solely credited for the re-emergence and spread of modern VR. Games such as Pillars of Eternity, Wasteland 2, and many more are all also widely considered to be hugely successful. All of these emerged from crowdfunding and 2012. Whilst today people are a little more cautious and perhaps a lot more jaded when it comes to crowdfunding, back in 2012 Kickstarter presented an unrivaled potential and a lot of excitement. So really, the takeaway point here is that 2012 was the year where it felt as though the games industry would change, that crowdfunding would be the source of that change, and with both Star Citizen and Elite Dangerous emerging fresh-faced and full of possibilities, it seemed as though anything would be possible. Now, off the back of all of this, during a time of extreme optimism towards a new way of funding games, in a year when nostalgia ruled and achieving any development dream felt possible, a single lone developer by the name of Josh Parnell created a Kickstarter campaign to raise funds for his dream space game. That game was called Limit Theory. The project had a funding goal of $50,000. However, it quickly blew past this goal, eventually settling on a sum of $187,000 or thereabouts. Once again, Kickstarter displayed there was a huge appetite amongst the public for this type of space game. Whilst perhaps the funds seemed lower compared to Elite and Star Citizen, keep in mind that just a few months earlier, Oculus had raised $250,000, and look where that led. So very quickly, the Limit Theory videos showed just how hard Josh had been working on this game. That not only had he gone way past proof of concept, but was actively building an extremely impressive game. Indeed, throughout this video, you've been watching footage from the Limit Theory development diaries. Even today, nearly a decade later, the visuals from this game are really interesting, and to me at least, I find them pretty impressive. And that's not even with mentioning the gameplay concepts. These seemed as though they were going to be very special indeed. Now, between January 2013 and December 2014, Limit Theory received no less than 21 video development diaries. These varied in length, but were always of fantastic quality, showing the remarkable progress that was being made on the game. The video updates showed off ships, combat, a huge variety of changes and improvements to the game's UI. In fact, the way that the UI was going to be used by the players seemed to look very impressive indeed, and clearly a lot of thought had gone into this. The videos also discussed the way missions would work, the way civilizations and cultures would emerge and function. They showed the progress and changes being made to the game's graphics and many other things besides. The important part was then that the Limit Theory dream was alive and well. Limit Theory was indeed making progress. In 2015, however, the video diaries stopped. Limit Theory continued onwards, however, with its development. What's more, over the following years, the game's development team grew a little to cope with the demand for the emerging game. All in all then, things were looking very good for Limit Theory. However, Josh made no secret of the fact that things weren't easy. There were development troubles, as to be expected as with any game, and certainly some cracks were starting to show. Eventually, long stretches of radio silence occurred from the development updates, with the occasional sporadic updates detailing the latest progress. Unfortunately, finally, 6 years after the game's Kickstarter campaign, development on Limit Theory was cancelled. The project was just too large in scope to continue, and the challenges too numerous. Not to mention the huge financial, physical and mental burden that Josh was loaded with over all of these years, a huge lot of pressure. Now fortunately, the vast majority of supporters of Limit Theory were extremely understanding about the situation. Kickstarter, of course, is always a risk, and sometimes things just don't pan out. This was far from a case of people just taking the money and running with it. Limit Theory proved to be a tale of huge ambition. Even today, the Limit Theory development videos are an interesting watch. You can find them linked in the video description. The game concepts on display were impressive, and Josh had not only a lot of knowledge about the topics at hand, but also very clearly had a lot of passion. In some ways then, even whilst Limit Theory was never completed, it could perhaps be considered nonetheless a tale of possibilities and awesome potential. Finally, all of this wraps up with a new bit of information that emerged just a few days ago, and that is July of 2022 for those of you who are watching this video at some point in the future. So Josh here gave a new update to the Kickstarter supporters, and of course with me being one of the Kickstarter backers myself, I got notification of this. So along with the update, the source code for Limit Theory development has now been made public. This also came with another release, which was the Limit Theory prototype, a very early version of the game which can be played. All of this can now be downloaded. Again, you can find the links for that in the video description. So during his post during the update, Josh also explained that there are a huge number of gaps in the code, that it was far from finished. Whilst he feels it's unlikely that anyone will be able to do much with this code, the space game community has proven itself time and again to be a great source of massive talent and massive motivation. So just maybe there is enough code in here, enough source code, and enough talent out there for someone to build a working version of Limit Theory. Time on that one will tell. But if not, then it's still an amazing testament to the power of dreams. Whilst Limit Theory unfortunately and ultimately wasn't successful, today it's still a testament to dedication, to possibilities, and to potential. And that is something which remains extremely valuable and important. That then brings us to an end of this video. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys and girls next time.